Okay, welcome again to Wickerson Studios. I am honoring the ModeLab tutorials and I am looking into their advanced data trees. It's one part. I think that's all I need to get through it, but let's jump right into it and have a look at it. It's pretty thick. I'm not sure what I'm going to do after this. I take a look at the series of Horikawa's work and it just blows me away. He's up to date. He shares his files. He's so organized. He does publications. I just don't have any of that in my nature. Anyway, let's jump in here and see what we have. I'll set it so when I'm clicking on something, it'll actually jump in there and show you what's going on. So the first section of it, you can go off of here and find and watch the tutorials. But actually, I find the advanced section a little almost easier to get through, except for the last script, than the intermediate. Anyway, he goes in, he makes some series of points. I believe he goes in a series of points. Yes, that's what he does, and he actually graphs them in many ways. So let me center this right here and shows you what he does very nicely in this first script is he basically shows you how you can take a series with a certain count and use the cross-reference to build yourself some points. And he shows you how they're numbered if you were to do that. And you can see there's nothing organized. It's just counting all the way through, all the way up to the last point. And he says, well, that's one way to do it. And he shows a lot of data. I show a lot of param viewers, a lot of data through this. The other way I do it is I go in and he says, well, let's take one and let's put one series into the Y and then let's graph the other one. And I decided to use the path mapper to graph. Well, it's the same to use the path mapper to graph if you set it to grafting or if you type it in yourself into this script. It's up to you, or it's the same as putting it in and grafting it itself. So there's all these different ways to get where you need to go. It shows you the data is then set up in a tree structure. You can tell by the dashed line as opposed to a list. Then he goes so far as to show you the difference of using that and possibly, what did I swip? Yeah, he does he flips the matrix on what's happening there. By pulling out the construct point there, and you'll see the count is from 0 to 7 in that direction, and then there's 0 to 7 in this direction. He goes farther and uses the tree statistics tool, which is very nice, and he shows you what you can capable of pulling out of that. So when you're done with those points, you can pull out not just the paths, you can pull out the length of those paths, and you can pull out the actual count of those paths. So that's for a really nice first intro on the advanced. Does it well, and they provide the files, and I provided these kind of copied files as I kind of play with them. They then say do not use, and they say really, and I was surprised that they say don't use the flattened tree, shift paths, but really try and get away with not using the path mapper, because if things change in your data structure farther up before the path mapper, you have to go in and you have to retype things in here to make it fit that. So they try and avoid that, and he shows you all the awesome tools that are right here in the sets tree list. Okay, so we're at 3 minutes. He goes in, he makes a surface, and I've put one in here and internalized it, but there it is. He divides the points up in there so they're kind of flowing up and down. I've kept my point count pretty small. Take this off so we can get here. He shows the domain that comes out of that. He shows the tree data that comes out of that. And then he interpolates it in this direction, and he uses flip matrix to put it in that direction. He definitely uses the simplified tree, so you can actually get in there and make your files a little more condensed. And you see here that it goes down to a path of just one path A, as opposed to having ABC. And he draws those lines again and shows you how that can differ. The same lines, but different param viewers. And then he says we're going to get into clean tree, relative items, split tree, and prune tree. And that's exactly what they do. So let me just group that together. The next one is this series, and I think they do a nice job here of going in, grabbing the same surface, cutting it into points, showing you that graph, showing that simplified tree, and then saying, here's what the tree statistics. Let's pop it on there, and you can actually number and take a look at what you have at each point and follow your data. And then he shows examples of what that looks like, not only in its param viewer of 11 branches with 6 items, this one as 66 items with 1 item, 66 branches with 1 item, and 66 branches with 1 item, but watch how the paths change before and after the simplification. And then you'll notice the tree looks a little different because the trunks and the bigger branches have been cut off after that simplified tree. So the data coming out then after grafted, then simplified. He does graph the paths and takes them into a nice pattern of numbering the points. and he shows you how that's a list of single points. And then he says, let's take this and let's put it into the relative item and draw lines between it. And he follows a polyline as it steps between the points. And he's saying we're just adding one. We're going over one and up one, over one and up one from each point. And then they go so far here, and they says, well, let's take that and make it a little more interesting and use the prune tree to get rid of nulls, because you don't want the lines at the end of it, at the end of those points going nowhere. And he builds a polyline. Says, let's chase this from 0, 0. You can start at any point and go from 0, 0 to 0, 1 to 1, 1 to 0, 1, and then you're chasing that around and closing that polyline. I thought it'd be funny to see what happens when you put in the NURBS curves, which are really nice patterns and designs. That's just something I added, and then what happens when you put in the interpolate. I'm actually really excited about that kind of discovery of the NURBS curve versus a polyline, and you can always set the closed or open, whatever you want to end up doing. A really nice sample of the file. Okay, we're at 6 minutes. We're going to keep rolling. The next one, I put a little caution on here for some reason. I have to remember why I did that yellow ungroup. He goes in, I think I redid the script, made the points, and said, oh, here's what he did. As he went through here and did the same pattern of grafting and simplifying tree and putting in the paths and putting the text tags on there, and then taking it to relative items and doing your pipe, your line on the outsides, stepped and staggered. I then said, and he's gone over one, he does the same pattern, and he does this polyline. He's actually gone in here on this case, and I have to show you, the surface is different than the one we had. He took a line, and he took that original surface up here that was there, and he said, well, let's deal with just cutting that line, splicing this. We have a half line to deal with. And in order to deal with half lines, he says, you're going to have to funnel it through a clean tree. And I put it in purple there because that's going to pair up for this NURBS curve that makes for a pretty interesting. It doesn't work if you don't do that clean tree. You're going to have some, it'll work, but it'll come up red here and here in the polylines, but you're going to end up solving this problem. You'll see how it has a strange effect on where the line goes and what kind of triangles are made. And you're going to see from their script as they jump up this count and they jump up this count, you'll see where you get a different design as it goes around that half surface. So pretty cool project. I would say that's one worth looking into to clean it up. And then once again, I'm just playing with a couple extra things here that I thought were interesting. Who knows what I'd end up doing with that, but it does look kind of fun to space in between and make lofts between those. You can make some ring beautiful forms before you extrude. Anyway, really nice script again. And then, actually, I didn't mean to turn that preview off. Let's leave it on. Let's just group it. The next one is right before I say it gets insane to follow. So let's jump in here. And I have it on blue because I really like this script. So go in there and grab a bunch of lines. And it's a really nice script to grab any set of lines you want. Going in and using multiple curves, points on curves, and saying, okay, how am I going to end up getting at these points on those curves and get them out of this structure and actually get them controlled and into a tree data instead of just a list. So the alternative is to go through there and do the same thing they did, graft it, look to the curve points, and then he says, I really have to filter out through the simplifying the tree and tree statistics. He takes this data through deconstructing the paths, and this is where they talk a lot about how do we take those paths apart, how do we deal with that data. He deconstructs it, he flips it, he explodes the tree, he gets the data, and then he does an equality sign to check and find the pattern to call out so he can go back to the original path and get rid of the beginnings and ends of that tree, which is really nice. It's wherever the lines had a 0, 0 or a 1, 1, and you can see that here. Any of these that had a path like 0, 0 here, 1, 1 here, and 2, 2 there. How do you call that out? And he shows a really nice formula running through here and ending up getting rid of them. So when he's done, he can then use a shift paths on that and bring it back one to control the data, and then do a curve closest point to an evaluate curve back to constructing a plane on there, and he's able to orient whatever he wants at that time. He chose put a square on there. Really nice script because he ends up in this script taking these lines and orienting those squares on there with full control over where they go. So if you think about putting buildings following a path or a house and not having them end up being on the ends, that script is pretty incredible to watch. I don't know why I'd use it, but it's such a creative thing. I think it's really worth having that as a snippet or as a cluster, as something you could possibly use. The next one I say is insane to follow, and it is insane to follow the first time through. It's quite long. He's looking at a lot of data, and as we jump in here, you'll see what happens. He grabs a region. I'm at 9-10 minutes right now. He grabs a square region. He says, okay, we can populate that we could take the populated count down, put it into a mesh, and now the whole point of this is to take this mesh, and he says you can do this with a cube, and you can do it with a three-dimensional point. That's fine, but we're going to avoid that. We're going to stay two-dimensional for now. He says deconstruct the faces of the mesh, and he starts dealing in meshes. And with that, find the face normals, find the point sizes, and you can see you got all this data running through here that's just kind of everywhere, and there's a small little count, and it's all disorganized. He says, how can we organize that to a point? He does a really nice job of bringing in this point, and if I just throw a little tiny sphere on here for now, I think a sphere here, you'll see as he takes the base, he's got this sphere on here that's set, and he just moves this point around until he kind of orients that sphere in the bottom, in the one corner of it. And he says, from that point, let's use a curve closest point to number all of these mesh triangles, because as if we're going to fabricate it, he simplifies the tree out of the polylines being made. He finds the polygon centers. He says, where's the distance from that ball, let's say, to those center points? And then with that data, he flips the matrix, and he puts it into a sort, which is very nice. More tree statistics are coming out of path right here and going into your keys and your sort values. And I think that's, I put red there because that's really something I'm still wrapping my head around, the sort list and when it goes into keys and when it goes into A and when you reverse that list. Pretty tricky to follow. Down here, he chases this formula down to, let's replace the paths with those centers, with those points, so we can actually number them. But you'll see they're numbered in a much better order by the time we get to the end, and I'll show you what happens. So as we go in here and we remap with the bounds and with a remap tool, he goes through an integer and he merges that with deconstructing the tree once again, which is what this is really about, and constructing a tree from the data to take it apart, put it back together, kind of like taking apart a point and putting it back together. He flips the data, he says, let's replace the paths, and with that, he shifts the paths, finds the tree statistics, and does a repetitive pattern that basically allows him to find these points, use the tree statistics, put them in there so they're all numbered, and you can see they start to move from low numbers over here all the way up to big numbers over here, and he's done an incredible job of sorting. He does a repeat pattern and color codes it. So I think when we did a little bake on here, or we got a color, let me see if I can get in there and get that to figure out. I've got too much in here that's coming out, so it's just going to be a big mess. He's got it color coded that it jumps from two different colors here as we bring it in. Maybe I can show that. We're at 12.5 minutes, and I still want to get through the last script. We're going to take off all this, preview off. Let's take off all this, preview off, and let's take off that last one, preview off. And then let's see what we have here to actually show over here. You've got this one, there it is. So you've got the two colors that are actually coming through and showing us it's numbered, how you're going to play off of a repeated pattern of, white, pink, white, pink as you move through there. So a really nice example of that. And what I did was I just rewrote that whole thing. I was like, I can't, that was insane to follow. And I think it really was. And I'm going to put that in kind of a cautious yellow, if I can get it to slide through there, because that's one to go through. And then I simplified it like crazy. I took out all the data as we go into this last minute and a half. And you basically see what he does. He took that square, as I take this off, rectangle, he finds the points, he builds the mesh, he takes the faces and the points, he ends up finding a list item to draw a polyline and make those sections. So if I bake that right now, these would all be triangles I could pull out. He simplifies the tree, takes one side, one of the tree into the paths to sort, and the other side he takes into the centers and brings it close to that sphere, which is over here. So he basically finds a distance here that he can sort from that distance these paths. And that's once again that key instrument to understand. He remaps it through an integer. He deconstructs the path. He constructs the path again, flips the matrix, and then takes those replaced paths into this order. But at that time, and I've got a minute, less than a minute, he graphs it. He moves through polygon center. He simplifies the tree, does the same thing with the tree statistics. He deconstructs it again. He does a beautiful weave. He puts in a hashtag for the text, and he ends up making a text tag of something that's actually more useful and functional, not just to bring in there to maybe laser cut onto your piece that you're cutting out. You can actually engrave that in. You could also have it as a baked in toggle here. So now that the objects are built in, with 20 seconds left, you could go into Rhino here, and since the objects are there, you can see those are all numbered. And if you didn't believe me, in the next 5 seconds, you can go into properties in here and take a look to see in the properties what is that numbered item. Thanks for watching. Wow.